Welcome to the SBA Paycheck Protection Program 2021 relaunch updates webinar, the second in our Economic Relief Act webinar series. This series is being recorded and will be available for review on our website. Today's webinar provides an overview of updates on recent changes and enhancements to the PPP program directly from the U.S. Small Business Administration's NC District Office. I'm Bob Weston, Director of the SBTDC statewide COVID-19 Business Recovery and Resiliency Program, a CARES Act funded initiative expanding Small Business and Technology Development Center's capabilities to assist businesses in successfully navigating the COVID-19 crisis. The SBTDC is the business and technology extension of the University of North Carolina system. For over 36 years, the SBTDC has been a resource for business owners, providing confidential counseling, educational programs, and a connection to university resources to help them make their businesses better. The SBTDC operates 10 regional centers across the state that are hosted by our UNC system campuses, with 16 offices serving all 100 North Carolina counties. Business resiliency counselors are now embedded with each of our regional centers. It's my privilege to introduce Mike Ariola, Acting Director of the U.S. Small Business Administration, North Carolina District Office. As Acting Director, Mike Ariola oversees an office that drives economic development by assisting local entrepreneurs with starting and growing businesses. He also directs the implementation of SBA programs related to accessing capital, business advising, and government contracts. Mike?
Great. Thank you so much, Bob, for having us. And I want to thank the SBTDC for hosting us on this second in a series of webinars targeted towards discussing the various programs available for folks to use following the recent enactment of the Economic Aid Act. Just by way of an introduction to the SBA, we are a U.S. government agency, and we were formed in 1953 to help Americans start, develop, and succeed in business. And we do that through four basic program areas: capital access in the way of SBA loans, counseling and training resources. We've also got a suite of government contracting programs to help small businesses tap into the federal contracting marketplace. And finally, we have a host of disaster-related loan assistance programs available to help folks recover in the aftermath of earthquakes, hurricanes, and even COVID-19, where we have a direct SBA loan for that. I'm glad to be joined today by three of our staff members. Patrick Rodriguez is our Senior Area Manager for the Raleigh area. He'll be helping me field some of the Q&A questions that come up. Walter Lara Figueroa is our Lender Relations Specialist based in Charlotte with me. He'll also help out with the Q&A. And here for logistical support is our Lead Economic Development Specialist, Eileen Joyce. So thank you all for joining me and for lending a hand. And with that, let's go ahead and take it away. Bob, if you want to go ahead and pull up the slide deck. All right, next slide. Next slide. So we're going to cover a couple of key things today. I'm going to talk about some of the key dates that have already kicked in. I'm going to talk about the distinction between first draw PPP loans and second draw PPP loans. I'm going to give a little bit of forgiveness update, that is an update on the process of getting your PPP loan forgiven, and what to do now, and additional resources to help folks with their PPP application process. Next slide. So as a result of the congressional legislation that was recently signed, we've done a number of different things to enhance the PPP loan process. We've reinstituted the lender match platform, which I'll talk about in just a minute. And we've been partnering with folks such as the SBTDC to continue to provide outreach and training on the various programs available, including the new PPP rollout. Next slide. Okay, so on January 11th, the PPP portal opened up for first draw PPP applications from community financial institutions as a means for SBA to reach out to minority and underserved segments of the community and to give them an opportunity to apply. That was later expanded for second draw PPP loans on the 13th. On the 15th, we opened it up for lenders with 1 billion or less in assets. And as of January 19th, all lenders now have the ability to apply for a PPP loan on behalf of their applicants. And finally, on March 31st, all PPP applications must be submitted. Next slide. So what is a first draw PPP loan? If you're getting your PPP loan for the first time, well, then that makes you a first draw PPP borrower. What makes you eligible? All of those eligibility criteria that we had last time around are still in effect, but there are some additional types of entities that are now eligible, and I'll talk about those in just a moment. The covered eligible expenses are now expanded, and this is a very important point. Last year, we said that if you had 60% of your PPP loan used towards payroll expenses and the rest used for mortgage interest and rent and transportation and utilities, then you can get the whole loan forgiven. Now, we've added a couple of new categories to that. In addition to those expenses, we now say that if you have incurred any expenses to provide personal protective equipment for your staff and your customers, or you've done other things to retool your business to make them more in conformity with safety and health guidelines, then you can throw those expenses into the PPP loan proceeds mix. In addition, the second category of eligible expenses has to do with civil unrest. So if you have a downtown business that sustained damage to your windows, for example, or there was a lot of graffiti that you needed to remove from your storefront, you can fold the expenses of repairing those into the PPP mix as well. So those are the two categories of expenses that are now eligible. First of all, PPE and the cost of retooling your business, plus any repair expenses as a result of civil unrest. Provided you meet all of those, and of course 60% has to be used at least for payroll, then your entire PPP loan can be forgiven. In addition, the covered period within which to use PPP loan proceeds is between 8 and 24 weeks after disbursement. So your covered period to use the loan proceeds could be 9 weeks, could be 23 weeks, anywhere between 8 and 24. Under certain restrictions, certain borrowers may request an increase to their PPP loan amount. And finally, as mentioned earlier, you must apply on or before March 31st of this year or until congressional appropriations expire. Next slide. Okay, in terms of first draw applicants, newly eligible applicants include housing cooperatives, destination marketing organizations, which I know is convention and visitors bureaus, also certain 501c6 organizations such as chambers of commerce. This came up during our conversations with all the various chambers of commerce with whom we partner throughout the state. And a lot of them expressed the desire to be able to apply for a PPP loan. Well, now those are eligible, subject to certain restrictions as it relates to lobbying. And finally, eligible news organizations such as community newspapers and such are also newly eligible to apply for a PPP. Other than that, as I mentioned earlier, those that were eligible last year are still eligible now. So various types of business entities, sole proprietors and independent contractors, certain nonprofits, veterans organizations, and tribal businesses as well. Next slide. So what is a second draw PPP loan? In a nutshell, if you got a PPP loan last year during the first round, and you want to apply for another one, that makes you a second draw PPP borrower. And here's the deal. For most borrowers, the maximum loan amount is going to be 2.5 times the average monthly payroll. And that can be based on 2019 or 2020 payroll costs up to $2 million. Now that's a difference from the 10 million earlier approved for PPP. So because we want to be able to accommodate borrowers that are applying for a PPP loan the first time around, for the second draw PPP borrowers, it was important that SBA enforced a few restrictions on who's eligible to get a second draw PPP loan. And one of those restrictions is that the eligible amount is up to $2 million. Also, for borrowers in the accommodation and food services sector, if you're a second draw PPP borrower, the maximum loan amount for the second draw PPP loan is not 2.5, but 3.5, your average monthly 2019 or 2020 payroll costs, again, up to $2 million. And finally, we do have a separate form for second draw borrowers. That's that's form number 2483-SD. And by the way, as I'm talking, you might want to bookmark this website. It's sba.gov/PPP. All of the information that I'm talking about, you can find there, and you should check back for any updates as well. Next slide. Okay, so here are some additional eligibility criteria that apply for a second draw borrower. The first is that you have used or will use the full first draw PPP loan amount, only for eligible expenses, mind you, before the second draw PPP loan is disbursed. You also need to ensure that you have no more than 300 employees. And finally, here's a key distinction. Your business has to demonstrate at least a 25% reduction in gross receipts between comparable quarters in 2019 and 2020. So what does that mean? That means that in order to take advantage of a second draw PPP loan, in addition to having no more than 300 employees and no more than $2 million, your business has to have demonstrated that it suffered a reduction in gross receipts from year to year. And it has to be an apples to apples comparison. So what you would do is you would compare first quarter 2019 gross receipts to first quarter 2020 gross receipts, or second quarter to second quarter, third quarter to third quarter, etc. Or failing that, you can demonstrate, if you're able to, demonstrate at least a 25% reduction in gross receipts for the entire year of 2019 versus 2020. So how do you actually demonstrate that? What kind of paperwork or evidence do you need to have in your folder? One way to do that is if you're doing the quarterly comparison, SBA has, and this again is available at sba.gov/PPP. There are a couple of ways that you can demonstrate that if you're looking at quarterly, at a quarterly basis. One is that SBA recommends is, this one sounds a little bit odd to me because these are very expensive to do, but it's nonetheless an acceptable way to do that. If you have the ability to have audited quarterly financial statements prepared, and you have the ability to compare from quarter to quarter, that's acceptable. Also, for the vast majority of small businesses that we're talking to, a set of interim financial statements prepared internally, whether that means run off your QuickBooks program or whether your bookkeeper prepares that for you, that's acceptable also. So you can have internally prepared, quarter 1, 2019 versus quarter 1, 2020, etc. Provided that you sign off on those interim financial statements, sign off on every single page of that, because that's usually what your lender is going to require when you submit that to them for your application. And then when you're comparing 2019 versus 2020 on an annual basis, one way that SBA suggests you do that is you take your tax returns from 2019, and then you prepare a draft of your tax returns for 2020, and hopefully that will show your 25% reduction in gross receipts. You do not have to actually file your 2020 tax returns, but just provide a draft of that to your lender for them to review. And then the expectation is that whatever you provided in draft form, that is eventually what you will file come tax time. And there's more information on that at irs.gov. Next slide, please. In terms of PPP loan forgiveness, there are a couple of updates that were promulgated as a result of the Economic Aid Act. And these are some very important, very positive, beneficial ones that we thought we'd draw to your attention. Some of you, last time around, when you were seeking out forgiveness for your loan, the SBA said, okay, we'll go ahead and look at that forgiveness calculation, but you must deduct the value of any economic injury disaster loan advances that you receive. And recall that last year, we were able to give grants of up to $10,000, depending upon the amount of employees, the number of employees that you have. And that was totally free money. We said last year that you have to deduct the cost of that advance. And what that resulted in was a small loan balance that each of our borrowers ended up that was repayable to the bank. Now it is the case that idle advances are no longer deducted for forgiveness payment. What happens now if you last year already got forgiveness from your borrower, but you had that idle advance loan amount outstanding? Let's just say you got an idle advance of $9,000, and as a result of that, you now owe the bank $9,000. Don't touch that. Don't do anything with that, because what SBA is going to be doing is we will be contacting every bank directly to pay off that loan account on your behalf. We're not going to be paying you to reimburse. We're just going to be paying off that loan balance. So you need not do anything, and you can stay tuned for more information on that. And I'm sure as the announcements are rolled out, we'll be sure to get the press out to all the various media outlets. So don't worry about that at all. Also, some other important tax considerations is that forgiven PPP loans are not taxable income. So that's a very, very important positive thing, because if folks were getting PPP loans of like $500,000, then the old school ways was to be able to was that you had to include that as taxable income. No longer the case. Anything that's forgiven is not taxable income. Also, there was a lot of ambiguity as to whether or not expenses that a small business incurred that were paid with PPP loan funds are even tax deductible. Well, yeah, as a result of the Economic Aid Act, those expenses are in fact now tax deductible. And you can see irs.gov for any details. Excuse me. In addition, the expanded forgivable expenses that I was just talking about, that is the cost of personal protective equipment, retooling your business, plus any repair costs as a result of shattered windows and that sort of thing due to civil unrest. All of those are also permissible for any PPP loan not already forgiven. And coming soon, actually, it's already here, there is a simplified forgiveness application for PPP loans of $150,000 and under. Again, you can check that out at sba.gov/PPP if you want to take a look at that forgiveness form. Next slide. So what do I do now? And what additional resources are available for assistance? First things first, contact your lender to initiate a PPP application or to seek them out for a second draw application. Especially if you're going to look for a second draw application, your lender already has a file on you. And I'm hearing that a lot of banks have on their online systems your information already, so that with some banks, when you go on the application form and start keying in your name and your EIN, etc., that the application already starts to pre-populate. So that would be a terrific time saver for you. You do not have to go back to your first PPP lender for a second draw loan. So if you wanted to seek out another lender, or if you're just applying for a PPP loan for the first time, go to sba.gov/lendermatch. That is the SBA's lender match tool, where you can key in your details, the amount of the loan that you need, and any lender that has opted into that search filter has the ability to reply back to you and say, yes, we're interested in talking to you more. It's not the application process itself, but it's a way of connecting borrowers with prospective lenders that would be interested in your application. And as I said, sba.gov/PPP is the one that you should bookmark. We are also available for assistance. Go to sba.gov/local assistance for any help that you might need. I'd encourage folks to subscribe to our SBA e-newsletter so that you all can get news of important events such as the one that we're having today. You're certainly welcome to follow us on Twitter, and also you're free to contact us at 704-344-6563 or email us at nc@sba.gov. Next slide. There are a host of SBA-sponsored resources that are available for assistance. My thanks once again for the SBTDC for your assistance today, and they are also a very important, valuable resource for you as you look to navigate the PPP landscape these days. As Bob mentioned towards the beginning of this presentation, they actually have a cadre of counselors who specialize in COVID-related assistance, and their counselors are across the state. So you're welcome to visit with them to set up an appointment, and they can counsel you virtually. In addition to SBTDC, there are the 10 chapters of SCORE throughout the state. There are also 4 women's business centers across the state of North Carolina in Asheville, Charlotte, Raleigh, and Durham, and Fayetteville. And soon to be opened is our 5th one, to be opened at Winston-Salem State University. And there is also the Veterans Business Outreach Center that is also SBA sponsored, and they're located at Fayetteville State University. And a special thanks to our 58 North Carolina Community College small business centers. They're not SBA sponsored, but we do a lot of collaborative work with them, and they're just a good all-around resource for assistance as well. So with that, Bob, shall we go ahead and entertain questions?
Sounds great.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go through the questions, and from time to time, I'll turn to Patrick and Walter to give me a hand with these. And the first question is, can we get a copy of the slide deck? And I believe the whole recording is going to be posted on the SBTDC's website at sbtdc.org. Second question is, second PPP loans less than 150,000 to S Corp. Here's his clarification. Please discuss the documentation requirements for second PPP loans less than, I'm seeing, 150,000 to S Corps. Are Form 1040 Schedule E and substitute for Schedule C? In the case of owner's draw versus Form 940, what is acceptable? Walter, do you want to go ahead and take that? Can you see the question in the Q&A?
Let me look at the question because I had a lot of parts to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's in the Q&A.
Yes, I see it. So what is happening on the 1040s acceptable for this? For the owner's draw, if you're talking about the income, what would be acceptable? You're obviously not getting a 1040, so for that it would be a partnership. So then the partnerships would be on the owner's draw, which would be found on your K1s, on your forms 1065s, which then is coming from the self-employment tax. So it would be line 14 if you're paying yourself, not the draw. So you can't use the owner's draw. What would count there as the partnership would be that line 14. That's what would count. You would be looking for the form 1065.
Okay. Next question. If I had to put in new software to serve my clients remotely instead of in person, would that be deductible? You know, I did see something about cloud migration being allowable. Walter, I see you nodding your head. What do you have to comment on that?
Yes, because that's almost like an eligible expense that you're using for practicing social distancing. It's almost a form of PPP.
PPE.
Yeah, PPE. I'm sorry, PPE. Yes.
Okay.
So yes, that is acceptable.
Okay, thank you. Next question. If I had a PPP 1 draw and used 50% for payroll and had no 40% expenses, would 50% be forgiven? Patrick, what do you think of that?
They would have a reduced forgiveness. And there's a follow-up question to that. You know, did they pay the remainder back or did they keep it? So depends. But if they didn't meet that 60% for payroll threshold, their forgiveness would be comparably reduced. So we can answer that question more thoroughly if they give us some numbers and email us.
Yeah, okay. Next one, we are a bar that has been closed since March 2020. We received PPP. Those funds were used for expenses that we had during the closure. We did not have a lot of payroll, closure, I see. We did not have a lot of payroll. Most of the funds were used for expenses, insurance, rent, utilities. Can we reapply for PPP second draw using the same 2019 payroll numbers? I know the use may not be forgiven, but will be just a loan unless used for the 60-40% uses. Walter, do you want to comment on that one?
Let me look at that's in the chat box. This is the business owner that has a bar. Was that correct? Is that the
Correct.
question?
Yeah.
Okay. So they received it. So what they can, if they didn't even meet the 60-40 threshold, if they were a bar closed to social distancing, or some of the people resigned from their positions due to the fact that they were on unemployment, you couldn't get them back. So you might be able to push the 60% closer to that 60% threshold. What's going to be done is going to be done in a ratio that the forgiveness is going to happen to accommodate that 60%. So some of the payroll, some of the utilities will be forgiven, and since you use it for all of the recurring, for all acceptable expenses on the you can apply for the PPP second draw, as long as you have your gross receipts below that 25% threshold as well.
Okay.
I'd like to add that they may be eligible for a safe harbor because they they were mandated to be closed, and that would qualify them for a safe harbor, which would allow them forgiveness.
Yes.
Thank you, Patrick. Okay. Next question. Our nonprofit raised funds to provide food assistance to people in need, but that makes it look like we haven't had a 25% reduction in income. Is there a way to demonstrate that? Oh, interesting. Yeah. Folks, any commentary there? Our nonprofit raised funds to provide food assistance, but that makes it look like we haven't had a 25% reduction in income. Is there a way to demonstrate that? And again, the 25% reduction in gross receipts, not income, gross receipts, is required only for a second draw. Yeah. Any commentary on that? I would tend to think that 25% reduction in gross receipts really is a firm sort of requirement. Yeah, you all agree?
Yeah, I'd like to double check on that just to see if donations count as gross receipts for nonprofits. I'd have to check the rules for that just to make sure.
Yeah, and so you probably want to get back with Bob Weston, I gather, on the answer for that?
Yes.
Okay. I started my business in early 2020, so I don't have past income to compare for a loss. This is why I did not apply for the first run. I am a sole proprietor. It says, go by my business plan is the question. I think what this person is asking is, I started my business in early 2020. I don't have any past income to compare for a loss. Well, yeah, here's the deal. It sounds like you would be a first draw applicant, but you're asking, how do I compare for that loss? You wouldn't be required to show a reduction in gross receipts if you're a first draw PPP, which PPP borrower, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind.
Right.
Patrick, are you reading that the same way I am?
Yeah, well, they must have started the business at least by February 15th. And
yeah,
if they did, they can compare their first quarter to the second quarter, third quarter, or fourth quarter of 2020.
Yeah, and that's the only occasion where it doesn't have to be apples to apples. It can be consecutive as long as they started their business on or after February 15th, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Will the 941 forms be acceptable for quarterly comparison? Walter, that's yours?
I'm sorry, one more time. What was the question?
Yeah, will the 941 forms be acceptable for quarterly comparison?
The 941 forms are your payroll taxes, so that's not applicable for gross receipts.
Yeah, again, quarterly comparison if you're going for a second draw loan. Yeah, Walter, you might want to click on your Q&A so that you can see all the questions coming up.
Okay.
Yeah. Is 2.5 times monthly payroll also the limit for first draw applicants? If not, what is the limit for first draw applicants? For first draw applicants, it is 2.5 times monthly payroll up to 10 million, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we got a lot of questions, so I'm going to try to zip through these as quickly as possible, all right? Would sales tax reports suffice as support for reduction in revenue? I would think so, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I applied and was denied after sending in requested, yet someone got over 1 million sending in fraud businesses. I cried, I was refused 5,000 for being honest. Yeah, to that, I would say that SBA really is clamping down on instances of fraud. And in fact, we're doing that with, especially with this round. We're doing things to guard against potentially fraudulent applications. Next question, our local bank informs us they are no longer taking applications for PPP loans. Suggestions for banks who may be able to help us, go to Lender Match, sba.gov/lendermatch. Next question, clarification on my question above, our nonprofit raise funds to provide food assistance. Okay, yeah, I think I answered that one already. Next question, is the Easy Forgiveness application out now or should we wait? Walter?
The Easy Forgiveness application is out on the SBA website for loans below 150,000. That's now the simple one that it is on the website, but some of the banks may not have updated yet on their internal softwares yet. So just check with your lender.
Right, the Easy Forgiveness application was what was being used last year for 150 and below. Now we've got an even more simplified one that's currently on our website, sba.gov/PPP. Next question, the PPP expenses are an add back for NC. Any update on NC following federal law? Oh, I see, they're talking about state taxes. Do we have anything to comment on that? Bob, are you seeing anything on that from the state side?
I haven't seen anything specifically about the state taxes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I would go consult North Carolina Department of Revenue, their website there for any updates there. Are the slides available for download? We'll post the whole recording for you to check out. Are SBA 1112 payments taxable? Oh, that's a good question. Patrick, have you seen, or go ahead, Walter.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, they changed that. So the 1112 taxable, they're not taxable. So your lender's not going to issue a 1099 anymore, because before SBA came out with guidance on that last week as well. So your lender's not going to issue the 1099. So it is not taxable as well.
Yeah. The notice is 2021-06.
Thank you.
IRS notice.
Yeah, thank you. And by the way, SBA Section 1112 payments, those are payments that SBA makes for existing SBA borrowers. That is apart from our PPP discussion. So folks, if we can just keep this discussion limited to our PPP loan, that would be a big help. Next question, last year there were requirements to not only spend 60% of the loan on payroll, but maintain full-time equivalents in order to receive forgiveness. Has the full-time equivalent requirement been relaxed and focused only on the dollars? Patrick?
No, you still have to maintain the pay rate. It's not necessarily, you want to take a look at the application, but it's the pay rate and that's important. So yeah, FTEs will have to be, you have to maintain that FTE count, but it's also kind of calculated a little bit differently. So you want to take a look at the instructions on the application itself to determine how that's measured. But that's on the forgiveness side. So that's not necessarily applicable on the application side.
Thank you. All right. Next question. I want to apply for a second round PPP. The bank does not have my loan number. Who can I call to obtain it? And I'm assuming you're referring to the SBA loan number, because I can't imagine why a bank would not have its own loan number. But in order to get your SBA loan number, you're welcome to send us an email, nc@sba.gov. We'll probably ask you some questions to confirm your identity, Jason. So we'll go ahead and handle it that way. Next question, can the second round PPP loan be applied to upgrades needed in order to function online? As a theater art school, we have to work online and can't meet in person. Yeah, we already answered that question. Yes, for cloud-based software, that sort of thing. Could you post the contact number for SBA that was printed on the previous slide? 704 344-6563. And maybe Eileen or Patrick, if you want to go ahead and jot that down. Next question, do you need to submit an application for forgiveness for your first PPP draw prior to applying for your second PPP draw? No, you don't. You do not need to apply for forgiveness of your first one prior to applying for your second. Is the first PPP loan amount expended but have not applied for forgiveness, counting gross receipts when determining eligibility for PPP 2? And I would say no, because it's not to be, no, the answer is no. Are there any special considerations for businesses owned by minorities or women for second draws? That was the whole purpose of our opening up the portal to community financial institutions first. These are your CDFIs and your minority depository institutions, such as Self-Help Credit Union, M&F Bank, Mountain BizWorks out in Asheville. The whole purpose of our opening the PPP portal to those community financial institutions first, and then later to smaller institutions with up to $1 billion in assets only. The whole purpose of that was to give underserved and minority populations an opportunity to apply, since there was the concern that they didn't quite have a sufficient opportunity to do so the first time around. So that was our way of addressing the concern that minorities and women needed to have a better opportunity this time. Next question, how do the EIDL affiliate with a PPP? Oh, I see. It's more like, what is the relationship between the EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and the PPP loan? There used to be, to the extent that an EIDL advance was covered, but now there really is no, they're two separate programs. Getting one doesn't preclude you from getting the other. And in fact, we've gotten a lot of businesses that have gotten both an EIDL and a PPP loan. Whereas the PPP loan is very specific, 60% payroll, plus the rest of that reserved for certain types of expenses. The EIDL is more of a general purpose working capital loan, right? And the EIDL is a loan. It has to be repaid. A question that we got the last night was, hey, how come I can't get my EIDL forgiven like my PPP? And because that literally takes an act of Congress. That's a legislative matter. So an EIDL is a direct loan that has to be repaid. Can I download these? Okay, we already answered that. I can't seem to get our initial lender to move to open up for second, so to run out early. Here, let me read that again. I can't seem to get our initial lender to move to open up for second PPP. Is there a potential for funds to run out early? You probably can't get them to move to open up for second PPP because they're still retooling, I am guessing, their systems to be fully compliant with the new PPP rollout. Is there a potential for funds to run out early? I don't think that we're seeing as much of a torrent of activity this time as we did last time. In fact, I saw at last count, there was about 35 billion in SBA PPP loans approved nationwide out of a total of 284 billion. So the money is getting out there, but it doesn't look like it's going to run out early, I would say. If you're a very concerned participant, go to lender.gov, sba.gov/lender match, and you can seek out lenders that are ready to accept your PPP loan. Next question, is there any consideration for looking at any 3-month period versus calendar quarters? That came up, and as far as I know, there is no consideration for looking at any 3-month period. As far as I know, it has to be your traditional calendar or fiscal quarter. That is January to March, April to June, etc. Patrick, Walter, are you seeing anything to the contrary?
That's the guidance SBA is given.
Yeah, like for example, if they wanted to compare February, March, April to February, March, April. Yeah, no, that's not available to you. Next question, as a one-person LLC or corporation, is there a limit on how much you can pay yourself monthly? Walter, how about you take that?
It's based on a yearly, so the most you could do it yearly would be 100,000. So you would just divide the 100,000 by 12 to get like your maximum monthly pay.
Yeah, and I think that question is, is there a limit on how much you can pay yourself monthly? I think the direct correlation to PPP is how much would we forgive, right? And I think Walter just answered that, up to 100,000. Is that correct, Walter?
So the monthly, if I just did the math right now on the calculator, it would be $8,333.
And that's based on?
$100,000 annualized salary.
All right, thank you. Next question, what are the new allowances for payroll costs besides group, life, disability, vision, dental insurance? Did we see any new allowances? I'm not aware of any.
No.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Next question, if we only had a loss of 18% in our childcare, had to close for 6 weeks, are we still eligible for PPP? Also, would we be eligible for ERTC? Again, you need to show a reduction in gross receipts only for your second draw, okay? Only for your second draw. If you're going to be a first-time PPP borrower this time around, you need not have to show that gross receipts reduction. Next one, did you say you can apply for more than was approved for the first PPP, Walter?
For more than was approved, maybe.
Oh, I see. I believe the question is, if I can rephrase that, I think they're asking, can we get an increase in our existing PPP, like our first draw PPP loan? You can, but under very, very narrow circumstances. For example, if there was an LLC, right, Walter? Take it from here.
So if there was a computation error, depending on what it was that the lender, you'd have to talk to your lender about that, because there's just a couple certifications on that. So you may not fit that parameter. So I would definitely talk to the lender about that. They'll have your specific situation, because they can see the paperwork as well.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Walter. Yeah, still got tons of questions and they're still coming in. So we're going to try to get to these as quickly as possible. It doesn't look like we're going to be able to answer all of them, but we'll let you know what to do thereafter. Okay. So what is the definition of housing cooperatives? Oh, for example, those I think are most applicable, like New York City. You got these housing co-ops where it's the corporation that owns the actual building, not the individual residents. That's basically a housing co-op. Next, what are the documentation needed to apply for a second PPP loan? Patrick?
So on the second draw, let's see here, looking at some of the tax documents. You can use Schedule C, Schedule F, your 1065, 1120S, 1120, 990, and 990EZ, depending on what type of business entity you've started with.
Yeah, and again, folks, if you go to sba.gov/PPP, click on that. There's actually a section for first draw PPP and second draw PPP. If you click participant, if you click on second draw PPP, that'll tell you the various things that are going to be needed as documentation. I do want to take a moment to say what would help folks. I mean, one question that came up a while ago, and it's a very, very good question, is what do I need to do to prepare for my application? I would say click on the form, see what information they're requesting. One thing that folks are going to be required to do is to certify a number of things. For example, I have no more than 300 employees. My expenses are going to be used for blah, blah, blah. As you're going through the application process, create a folder where you can stick all of this backup documentation in. If you're eventually going to be seeking out forgiveness for repairing, your storefront that got damaged as a result of civil unrest, or if you're eventually going to be seeking out forgiveness for the cost of surgical or facial masks and that sort of thing, as long as you're in the due diligence process now, go ahead and keep a record. Keep all of those receipts in one folder. If you know that your lender is going to say, okay, you're asking for forgiveness, show me that you have less than 300 employees. Well, then if you know that that's going to happen, go ahead and print out your roster of 297 employees and keep that in your folder. But it's always a good idea to have the backup necessary. And you may as well do that at the get-go, because if your lender's not asking for it now, they will when it comes time for forgiveness. And remember, lenders only deal in documents. That's the single biggest takeaway I want for you folks to have today. Next question. If a company reduces its income 25% or more in any quarter versus 2019, but a whole year had an increase, Is it still eligible for a PPP draw? Yes, provided you show that for any quarter to quarter, it has to be comparable quarters, first quarter 2019 versus first quarter 2020, et cetera, that will be fine. Next question, does a lender rely on your credit history or rely on your credit history for the loan? I think all lenders are going to be looking to some extent on your credit history. Patrick, I saw you shake your head. Is that yes
well,
or no?
For the PPP loan, it's kind of a walled loan application where they're taking primarily information you give them regarding your payroll and using that, and normally they're not doing credit inquiries on those.
Yeah, I heard that they're doing like a. Go ahead, Walter.
SBA has its own underwriting, guidelines that we have for the PPP loan. SBA does not require credit to be pulled. However, it is the lender's loan. So I do know some lenders are actually pulling it because they can add additional overlays. Or like when you're submitting documentation, so the lenders may have additional questions. So they may ask for additional documents as well.
Yeah, good point. While we're saying, all these various entities are eligible, for example, there might be some entities or some lenders out there that are saying, oh no, we're only doing X, Y, and Z. Or, although SBA doesn't pull your credit, we might, as a matter of course for our lender institution. So it's a very important point to keep in mind. Is there any assistance for businesses that were in the process of opening in 2020? And I think we answered that already. It's February 15, 2020. Should I apply for second PPP while waiting for the guidelines for shuttered venue grant? That I will not answer it at that time. You'll get more guidance when we receive more guidance about the shuttered venue grant. What can you do if you qualified for the first PPP loan but never received the funds in your account? However, the lender gave you the pre-approval amount, and for some reason there may have been some type glitch either with the banking system. Yeah, I think we encountered something like that. Walter, what do you think?
It would be good if you could just reach out to us directly for the, to the SBA district office, and we can get the EIN number. We can do a little bit more investigation on it.
Yeah, so Linwood, if you want to send us an email at nc@sba.gov, we can look at what exactly the status of your business with SBA was, and that will determine, the extent to which we can consider you as, a recipient or a non-recipient, and that would then determine whether you're a first draw or a second draw. So send us an email at nc@sba.gov. Can you please give a little more info for first-time PPP borrowers regarding what you must be able to show? The percentages used for what, et cetera. The percentages are the same. At least 60% has to have been used for payroll, and the 40% can be used for those eligible expenses that I mentioned earlier. This thing about 25% reduction in gross receipts, that does not apply to you as a first-time borrower. That applies only to second draw. Interested in a copy of the slides too? Email possibly? Yeah, we'll go ahead and do the whole recording. We're getting a lot of requests for the slides only, Bob, so maybe we should make a PDF available on your website? Yeah? Okay, let's do that.
Both the recording and the copy of the slides will be available at our website.
Perfect, thank you, Bob. Next question, business delayed from opening due to COVID. That's not a question. Thank you, Mike and Score. This is very helpful. We were a second draw. We did receive. Okay, Shirley, maybe you should email us nc@sba.gov with your question there. I'm trying to get through these as quickly as possible. I found 3 of the new, okay, 3, 5, okay, that's not a question.
That long question, Mike?
What?
That long question. I think it's in regard to some of the PPP portal issues, and as of yesterday, those should have been cleared up. So I would say ask your lender to resubmit, and that should have been taken care of.
Okay, all right, thank you, Patrick. What is the documentation and criteria for a new business open? Okay, we already said that. You had to have been open in business since at least February 15th, right? Do you have a date of when the shuttered? No, we do not have a date of the shuttered venue grant application. This is only a PPP session. We're not talking about shuttered venue grants. Which is the one to use, 3508S or 3508? And that 3508, that's the short form forgiveness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And 3508, that depends on things like the amount, right?
Yes,
I forget. My bad memory is failing me. Yeah, depending upon the amount. And you can just check out the individual forms to see what's the amount threshold. Next question, our business loss rental income starting in January 2021. We will not show a loss until the end of first quarter 2021. Are we eligible to apply now? I think our rules are pretty clear that it has to be 2019 versus 2020 is when you have to demonstrate the reduction in gross receipts. Again, for a second draw applicant only. What is the best source for PP1 forgiveness assistance resolution issues? Do we have a public email address for that to give out to the public for PPP1 forgiveness assistance resolution? Walter, or do they need to work with their bank only?
They should work with their bank because it is the lender's loan.
Yeah.
There's not much we can really do on that side.
Yeah, they need to work with their lender because it's the
Yes.
lender that's applying to us on behalf of the borrower for
Yes.
forgiveness, right? Okay, is payroll all forgiven for the loan amount? Yeah, again, 60-40, 60% payroll, etc. Where does forgiveness with the first round stand? Well, yeah, as far as I know, borrowers are still sending in their forgiveness applications to the lenders, and the lenders are forwarding that to SBA. What happens when the bank hasn't offered the first PPP forgiveness, but they send you another link to apply for the second draw? Again, we already addressed that. What is the process for approving the application, and how long does it take to process first PPP applications? I applied with XYZ Bank, and it's like a black hole, and there's no, I wonder if I should go with another lender and reapply. That's up to you. Go to sba.gov/lender match if you believe the lender that you're applying for isn't being sufficiently responsive to you. Next question, if you applied and received the first round PPP and plan to apply for second round PPP, can you receive? No, I'm not going to answer the shuttered venue grant questions.
No,
that is for a later time.
Yeah, but you cannot do both, that's for sure.
Yeah. I have already applied for second PPP loan and submitted only 2020 payroll info, and I have already applied for second PPP loan and submitted only 2020 payroll info, and based on 2.5 times, which is lower than first PPP loan in 2019 payroll. Can I resubmit or update the application? Yeah, Patrick?
Yeah, you should be able to. You want to make sure that you reach out to them as soon as possible, but they can withdraw your PPP loan application and then resubmit a new version of that with the updated financials.
Yeah. Next question, will there be a webinar? Oh, I think I just missed that. Somebody was, I think that question just got erased. Let me scroll up just a little bit. The question was, will there be a webinar about EIDL? Yes, there is. That's next week. Same bat time, same bat station. And then we'll talk about that again at the end. Can a company apply for second round PPP before receiving a response? We already talked about that. It has been more than a month since I applied for forgiveness of the first PPP draw. I have not received an answer or determination. Should I wait to apply for a second draw? Yeah, again, you need not wait on forgiveness for your first draw in order to apply for a second draw, okay? Can we apply for the same amount of the first PPP loan? If it's within guidelines, that is 2.5 times gross, average monthly gross payroll, or 3.5, depending on whether or not it's an accommodation or food service.
There's only one difference.
Sorry?
There's one difference that it would be capped, the maximum amount. So on the second draw PPP loan, it would be a maximum of $2 million. On the first, it would be 10 million. So if you had a $3 million one and you were eligible for the second draw, then it would be capped at 2 million.
Yeah, and that also answers Hilda's question right there. Next question, my business opened in August 2019, so I can't compare first, second, or third quarters with 2020 to show a 25. Not sure if yearly receipt, yeah, I just said, yeah, I told that, I mentioned that earlier. Yearly receipts are acceptable, but this one's saying, not sure if yearly receipts would be helpful, as we would not be in operation for a full year, and so it will show less revenue. Will second be, I think the regs say that it has to be either quarterly or the full year. And failing any ability to demonstrate either of those, I'd have to say the response would be no, as my response. Do you agree, Patrick?
So, so she opened in August, so she would have to compare third or fourth quarter 2019 to any quarter of 2020.
Yeah, that's what I thought. What is the contact information and numbers? Yeah, Eileen, maybe if you can put some of those in the chat, you can put our main line and our email address, which they're going to be in the slides anyway that Bob is going to post online, so you can get it from there. sbtdc.org, and you can get our contact details there, as well as the SBTDC's contact details. For first and second draw PPP loan applications, do all applicants need to prove necessity, or is it just larger loan applicants? How do you prove necessity? Actually, that more applies to the economic injury disaster loan, where the SBA makes that assessment. Again, yeah, I don't want to rehash the whole presentation, but I think our presentation was clear enough. So I'll let you take a look at our slide deck when that gets posted. Patrick, PPP loan one was $14,000 and client used $7,000 towards payroll. No other expenses were eligible. He has not had the loan forgiven. Does he pay back $7,000? Patrick, that was Leslie's question to you that we were talking about. Do you want to go ahead and field that one? Patrick, are you there? Did you freeze up?
I got kicked off. I got right back on.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Patrick, this Leslie is addressing this question to you because I think you addressed it with her, and that is the PPP1 loan was $14,000. Client used $7,000 towards payroll. No other expenses were eligible. He has not had the loan forgiven. Does he pay back $7,000?
You may want to pass that one to Walter because I didn't hear the first part.
Yeah, Walter, what do you think? Do you see Leslie's question?
So it's gonna be done in a percentage. So they won't need to pay the whole 7,000. It'll be a percentage of it as well to get to that 60% threshold. Your lender's gonna come up with those ratios. So that's gonna just be a ratio. You're gonna do the ratio on that in your lender. So you won't have to pay back the full $7,000 as long as you use the other 7,000 for the eligible non-payroll expenses.
Question for you, Walter, is that a percentage of the 7,000 or a percentage of the 14,000?
That I would have to do a little more research on. I'm not sure.
Yeah, 14,000 being the whole loan, but only 7,000 was for payroll. So, okay, you need to get back to them. Let's get back to Bob on that one. Okay, and that was for Leslie. What are the dates to use the second round? What is the deadline for applying? March 31st. Please review again qualifications for first-time PPP. I need to go through these as quickly as possible. You can find that on the slide, which Bob will post on his website. I received the first draw and I am applying for a second draw. If there was a negative in line 31 on my Schedule C, can I still get a second draw? Walter, that's a Walter question.
So if you a negative on that's on your Schedule C, that's your net net profit. So not sure. If you had a negative, then you didn't have any. You'd have to look at the whole. You'd have to look at the whole thing because usually, if it's a negative profit, you wouldn't have been eligible for the PPP loan anyway because you weren't making any money. So I'm just not really sure.
Yeah. What year is that tax return? Is that their 2019 or 20? Because
they don't say.
Because if it's 2019, it's too late. But if they're going to be working on their 2020 taxes, they can, look at that as hopefully having a positive number because folks take deductions and things like that to try to minimize that. So they may want to talk to their accountant or CPA and see what the benefits are of claiming more profit.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you, Patrick. Bob, I have 9:59. Do we need to wrap it up, I guess?
Yes, we are at the end of our time. I didn't want to interrupt, but we appreciate everybody participating. I'll try to respond to as many as these, and also evidently some people did get into the chat, which we were trying to direct all the questions to the Q&A. So we have some questions in there, and also Catherine received some questions via email that we'll respond to offline that didn't go through the Q&A.
Yeah, hey, Bob, let me interject if you don't mind. There are lots and lots of questions here available, and I think we tried to answer as many as possible. It's quite likely we're not going to be able to get to everybody with every single question. So a couple of things to leave you with. First of all, it's quite likely that SBA is going to come up with a list of frequently asked questions to post at sba.gov/PPP. So again, bookmark that and check back frequently for any updates. And the second thing is, hold your questions or take your questions with you, and feel free to check out the SBTDC business counselors that are available throughout the state. Again, they have a whole cadre of business COVID recovery assistance counselors that are available for assistance. SBA is a pretty small office here in North Carolina. We may not have the bandwidth to entertain every single question. So, make use of all the various SBA affiliated resources that are available to help you with your PPP related questions. So Bob, I'll flip it back to you. And again, I want to thank you so much for hosting us. I want to thank Walter and Patrick and Eileen also, who has been behind the scenes working to address a lot of the questions in the chat as well. So thanks, folks, and thanks, Bob.
Thank you. We really appreciate all of the help that you all have given us, and we're looking forward to the next webinar coming up. On next Thursday, we'll be on the EIDL, changes to the EIDL program at 9 o'clock. Watch for the posting on our website. We'd like to thank the SBA North Carolina District Office, all of our SBA partners, and the Community College Small Business Center Network for their support of this webinar. And we look forward to, you can find, by the way, you can find the recording and the slides on our website, www.sbtdc.org/coronavirus/webinars/HTML. If you're interested in an appointment with an SBTDC Business Resiliency Counselor, the best way to schedule one is just go to sbtdc.org/ERFC. That's sbtdc.org/SBTDC. Thank you so much, and we hope you'll join us. Here's the slide with the information on it. We hope you'll join us for the next webinar next Thursday morning at 9 a.m., and you can get that link on our sbtdc.org website under events.